Look at a pretty profound thought by the philosopher Alfred North Whitehead. He pointed out that civilization advances by extending the number of operations we can perform without thinking about them. It kind of sounds counterintuitive, right? Usually we equate progress with deeper, more complex thinking. But Cialdini uses this to set up a totally crucial foundation for us. Relying on mental shortcuts isn't a sign of laziness, it's actually a sign of an advanced society. We literally have to automate certain decisions just to survive the sheer complexity of our modern world.
Okay, so here is our roadmap for today. First, we'll look at the hidden weapons of influence. Next, the automatic operation of the mind. Then, the magic and power of the word because, followed by price as an indicator of quality. And finally, we'll wrap up with the contrast principle in America.
All right, Section 1. The hidden weapons of influence.
You know, to truly understand human psychology, we actually have to take a super fascinating little detour into ethology. That's the study of animals in their natural habitats. So consider the mother turkey. She is fiercely protective, loving, and constantly watchful over her chicks. But researchers discovered something incredibly bizarre. All of that profound maternal instinct, it's triggered by just one single thing, the specific cheep-cheep sound that the chicks make. Smell, touch, appearance, they literally barely matter. Scientists actually ran this crazy experiment using a stuffed polecat, which, by the way, is a turkey's natural sworn enemy. Normally, a mother turkey would attack it on sight, but when they put a tiny little tape recorder inside that stuffed predator playing the cheep-cheep sound, the mother turkey didn't just stop attacking. She actually gathered her mortal enemy underneath her to keep it warm. And the second they turned the sound off, boom, she attacked it again.
So the really crucial point here is that this turkey isn't making a conscious choice. She is operating on what scientists call a fixed action pattern. These are blindly mechanical patterns of action that happen in virtually the same fashion and in the exact same order every single time. Think of it like a pre-recorded tape installed right inside the animal's brain. When a specific situation pops up, the animal doesn't stop to think, the tape just plays. And this is exactly what Cialdini calls the click-run response. First, the animal encounters a trigger feature. Notice that it's just a feature. It's not the whole picture. For the turkey, it's just the sound, not the sight of the chick. Then, click, the internal tape is activated. And finally, run. The standard, unchangeable sequence of behaviors just rolls out. It saves the animal mental energy and, well, usually guarantees the right response out in nature. Usually.
Moving on to Section 2, automatic operation of the mind.
Now, it's super easy for us to sit back and kind of laugh at the silly turkey, but the hard truth is, you and I have these exact same click-run programs hardwired right into our own brains. The ever-accelerating pace of modern life has created this massive informational crush. We encounter more data in a single day than our ancestors did in an entire lifetime. We literally cannot analyze every single pro and con of every single decision we make. We absolutely need cognitive shortcuts just to function. We have to use rules of thumb. But here is the catch. While these automatic responses are a totally necessary defense mechanism, they also leave us incredibly vulnerable to exploitation by people who know exactly where our trigger features are.
Which brings us to Section 3, the magic and power of because.
Our first psychological lever is incredibly simple, but it is devastatingly effective. It shows how just a single word can completely hijack our rational minds. In a super famous experiment, Harvard psychologist Ellen Langer had people wait in line to use a library Xerox machine. She wanted to test what would happen when someone tried to cut in line. So when the person asked, "Excuse me, I have 5 pages, may I use the Xerox machine because I'm in a rush?" a massive 94% of people let them cut. The real reason worked perfectly. But then she tried a fake reason. The person said, "Excuse me, may I use the Xerox machine because I have to make copies?" Now really think about that for a second. Because I have to make copies is definitely not a real reason. Literally everyone in that line had to make copies, and yet 93% of people still let the person cut. The word because was the trigger feature. Click, run. Their critical thinking was bypassed completely.
So how does this play out for the American audience? Well, U.S. compliance professionals, marketers, salespeople, politicians, they know this rule intimately. They intentionally deploy the word because to completely bypass the critical thinking of the American consumer. Think about American political rhetoric across the entire spectrum. Candidates constantly frame their policies with the word because, providing a statement that sounds like a totally solid justification, even if it completely lacks any substantive logic. In American retail, you'll see signs that say, "Clearance because we need to make room." That triggers an automatic compliance response, making shoppers feel like they're getting a logical deal, which creates a really powerful illusion of justification.
All right, Section 4, price as an indicator of quality.
Moving to our next lever of influence, we're going to examine a deeply ingrained mental shortcut dealing with perceived value. Cialdini tells this amazing story about a friend of his who owned an Indian jewelry store in Arizona. It was peak tourist season, but she just couldn't sell her turquoise jewelry. It was really good quality, it was reasonably priced, but no one was buying it. Right before leaving on a trip, she left a quick scribbled note for her manager that said, "Price times 1/2, meaning, cut the price in half just to get rid of the stuff. But the manager misread her messy handwriting as price times 2 and actually doubled all the prices. When the owner finally returned, the jewelry was completely sold out. By doubling the price, she accidentally triggered a massive surge in sales.
And this perfectly captures the American consumer mindset. Those tourists in Arizona, they didn't know much about turquoise. So, navigating an unfamiliar market, they used a standard shortcut. Expensive equals good. In the very complex U.S. marketplace, buyers are constantly substituting a high price for actual research. And marketers absolutely know this. During U.S. retail peaks, like the holiday shopping season, companies will intentionally inflate prices just to manufacture a perception of luxury and prestige. If an American consumer sees a $20 bottle of wine sitting right next to a $100 bottle, that click, run response instantly tells them the $100 bottle is objectively better, even if they couldn't possibly taste the difference.
Section 5. The contrast principle in America.
Our final lever is a really fascinating flaw in human perception. It shows that how we see things totally depends on the order they are presented in. Imagine a corporate speaker standing in a podium, pointing to the vast infinite universe on a screen behind him and asking his audience to ponder the heavens so they can realize how insignificant their second quarter loss really is. I mean, it's a funny idea, but it's psychologically dead on. If you present a massive scale first, a subsequent large problem suddenly seems tiny by comparison. Our brains just don't measure things in a vacuum. We always measure them against what we just saw.
Let me give you a real-world example from an American Airlines flight at O'Hare Airport in Chicago. The flight was overbooked, so the gate agent got on the microphone and, trying to be funny, announced that he needed volunteers to take a later flight and offered a $10,000 voucher. The whole crowd laughed, but when he immediately followed that up with the actual offer, which was a $200 voucher, nobody moved. Because he set the anchor at $10,000, $200 looked like absolute pennies. He had to keep raising the real offer just to get any takers. The contrast principle totally worked against him.
But usually, the U.S. sales industry uses this principle highly effectively against the consumer. Just think about everyday American life. If you go into a men's clothing store, the salesperson is highly trained to sell you the most expensive suit first. Once you've already committed to spending $800 on a suit, well, an $80 sweater suddenly seems pretty cheap by contrast. In U.S. real estate, brokers might show you a terrible, wildly overpriced, set-up property first, just so the next house they show you looks like an absolute palace. And at American auto dealerships, they always negotiate the massive overall price of the car first, and only then do they suggest the undercoating and the upgraded tires, because next to $30,000, a few $100 feels like absolutely nothing.
So, the absolutely crucial takeaway from Chapter 1 is that we are all navigating a massively complex world with a brain full of automated shortcuts. We are all, at times, that mother turkey. So I want to leave you with this lingering question to ponder today. As you navigated the American marketplace, or even if you just browsed online for a bit, how many times was your autopilot triggered by a compliance professional today? Stay curious, stay vigilant, and thank you so